The room was decorated with candles and flowers that filled the air with a faint jasmine fragrance. Sophia, at the center of it all, looked like a princess in her light blue dress. Jack, standing beside her, couldn't hide his pride at being engaged to someone so enchanting. Guests were smiling and raising their glasses, eagerly anticipating the moment he would make the formal proposal. Everything was going as planned until Oliver, Jack's best friend, decided to grab the microphone. He was the kind of person who loved being the center of attention and used humor to tease people. At that moment, a confident smile spread across his face as he cleared his throat before starting. "Ladies and gentlemen," he said, his voice firm and laced with fake seriousness, "what an incredible moment, isn't it? We're here to celebrate the love of two wonderful people I know. Well, at least one of them." The guests laughed, thinking it was just another one of Oliver's harmless jokes. Jack and Sophia exchanged quick glances, already familiar with his sharp humor, but the tension in the room began to rise. "Jack, my friend," Oliver continued, now slowly pacing around the room, "you're a persistent guy, always have been. I remember when you told me you'd never give up until you won Sophia over, and well, here we are." He paused, smiled, and looked directly at Sophia. "But you know, Sophia, what I don't get is how you gave in so quickly. I mean, some people might find it odd how you spent so much time around me while he was trying to win you over." A ripple of awkward laughter spread through the room, followed by murmurs. Sophia frowned, confused, while Jack stared intently at Oliver, his fists starting to clench. "Oliver, this isn't funny," Jack said, his voice laced with warning. "Relax, Jack. It's just a joke," Oliver replied, raising his hands. But instead of stopping, he went on, "Or maybe not. After all, Sophia and I spent a lot of time together. People might even think that, well, that she couldn't decide between us. Don't you think?" His words hung in the air like a bomb about to explode. Sophia's eyes widened, shocked by Oliver's audacity. "What are you insinuating, Oliver?" she asked, her voice louder than she intended. "Oh, nothing much," he said with a cynical smile. "I just think everyone here should know that while Jack was crazy about you, the two of us had, how can I put this, our private conversations. Who knows what else, right?" The murmurs in the room grew louder. Some guests exchanged incredulous looks, while others whispered among themselves. Sophia felt her cheeks burn, not from guilt, but from humiliation. It was as if everyone in the room was judging her for something that never happened. "You've crossed the line, Oliver," Jack shouted, abruptly rising from his chair. He was furious, but his anger, instead of being directed at his friend, turned to Sophia in an instant. "So this is it? This is what you've been hiding from me?" "Jack, this is ridiculous," Sophia exclaimed, her eyes now brimming with tears. "You know this is just one of his awful jokes." "A joke? How can I know that, Sophia?" he shot back, his voice trembling with rage. "He's saying it in front of everyone. You never mentioned these private conversations." Sophia tried to approach him, but Jack stepped back. In a rash move, he grabbed his wine glass. Before she could react, the red liquid spilled over her face and dress, staining not just the fabric, but also what was left of the evening. "Jack!" Sophia screamed in shock. The entire room fell silent, but before she could say another word, he slapped her across the face. The sharp sound of the impact reverberated through the room, freezing everyone in place. The blow caused her to stumble back a few steps. Sophia brought a hand to her face, feeling the sting, but what hurt more was the humiliation. She looked around, seeing the faces of friends and family now staring at her with pity or judgment. "Enough!" Alexander's voice boomed through the hall, shattering the silence. He stormed forward like a hurricane, his face contorted with anger. "How dare you lay a hand on my daughter, you monster!" Alexander grabbed Jack by the collar, pulling him close. "You're not man enough to deserve my daughter, and now you've proven it to everyone here." "It was a moment of rage," Jack tried to argue, his voice now unsteady. "I didn't mean to. It was his fault." He pointed at Oliver, but it was too late. The damage was done. "I don't care who started it," Alexander shot back, shoving Jack away. "You should have been the first to protect her, not disgrace her like this. Now hear me clearly. You will never go near my daughter again, do you understand me? This engagement is over. Now get out of my sight before I call the police." Meanwhile, Sophia stood frozen, tears streaming down her face, as Alexander approached her and placed his hands on her shoulders. "Come on, sweetheart. We don't need this." As Sophia left the hall with her father, Jack was left alone, staring at the judgmental faces of the guests. Oliver, despite being the instigator of the chaos, remained in the corner, watching everything with a satisfied smile. That night, which was supposed to be a fairy tale, turned into a spectacle of shame and pain for Sophia. And as she walked out the door, she promised herself that she would never allow anyone to humiliate her like that again. The darkness of the night enveloped the quiet street where Sophia now lived, back in her childhood home, under the protective watch of Alexander. Since the disastrous engagement, the house, surrounded by tall iron gates, had become her refuge. But lately, even this refuge felt increasingly vulnerable. Sophia sat in the living room, her eyes fixed on a book she could barely focus on. A cup of tea sat cooling on the table beside her. At every small noise outside, her body tensed, and her eyes darted toward the window. "Sweetheart, you need to rest," Alexander said, entering the room. He looked at her with evident concern. "This stress is eating you up. It's not healthy." "I know, Dad," Sophia replied, her voice low and weary. "But I feel like he's out there, watching me." Before Alexander could respond, the sound of Sophia's phone interrupted their conversation. She glanced at the screen and felt her heart race. It was Jack. "Again?" Alexander asked, frowning. "Yes," she said, declining the call with trembling fingers. "He won't stop, Dad. He keeps calling, sending messages, showing up wherever I am. I'm scared of what he might do to me." Alexander clenched his fists, his anger barely contained. "I've already spoken to the police, Sophia. If he keeps this up, I'll go to him myself, and I'll take care of it. He's so unpredictable," Sophia whispered, her voice barely audible. "I just want this to end. I just want some peace." The next morning, Sophia was at the corner market, trying to maintain some semblance of a normal routine. As she picked out a few pieces of fruit, a shiver ran down her spine. She looked around and saw him, Jack, standing across the street, leaning against a car, staring directly at her. "You can't avoid me forever, Sophia," he shouted, drawing curious glances from passers-by. Sophia dropped the fruit and rushed inside the market, where the security guard approached her. "Are you okay, Mom?" he asked. "Yes, I just need a minute," she replied, trying to catch her breath. Jack didn't try to come inside, but he stood outside, staring intently. Later, when Sophia returned home, she found Alexander waiting for her in the entryway. He looked more tense than usual. "Are you all right?" he asked, taking her hands. "I saw him again," Sophia said, her voice breaking. "He was waiting for me at the market." "This has gone far enough," Alexander said, standing up. "I'm going to handle this right now." "No, Dad." Sophia grabbed his arm. "He's not in his right mind. I don't know what he's capable of. I don't want you to get hurt because of me." Alexander sighed and held her face in his hands. "I'm not going to let anything happen to you, understand? Nothing. And no punk like him is going to stop me." That night, Sophia woke with a start. A strange noise was coming from outside her bedroom window. She got up cautiously and peeked through the curtain. Her breath caught. There he was, Jack, standing in the yard, staring at the house. "Dad!" Sophia shouted, running to Alexander's room. Alexander appeared quickly, holding a bat he kept for protection. "Stay here, Sophia. Don't move." He went out the back door, but by the time he reached the yard, Jack was gone. When Alexander came back inside, he found Sophia crying. He pulled her into a tight hug. "He's not going to win, Sophia. I promise." But in the days that followed, Jack's behavior escalated. He started sending flowers to Sophia's workplace, with notes that ranged from apologies to veiled threats. One day, she found a bouquet at her doorstep with a chilling message: "You belong to me and no one else." The fear began to consume Sophia. She barely slept, and her confidence crumbled. "I can't live like this anymore, Dad," she said one day, her eyes red and swollen from crying. "He's everywhere. It feels like I'll never get rid of him." "You will, Sophia," Alexander replied firmly. "We'll find a way out of this, and we'll end it together." Sophia looked at her father, and for a moment, she felt safe. But deep down, she knew Jack was still out there, waiting for the chance to take control again. It was a grey morning, and Sophia walked briskly along the sidewalk, hugging her coat against the cold wind. She needed some fresh air after yet another sleepless night. The local coffee shop, cozy and discreet, seemed like the perfect place to try and find a shred of peace. As she stepped inside, the aroma of freshly brewed coffee and warm bread wrapped around her like a comforting hug. Sophia ordered a cappuccino and settled into a corner seat by the window. As she stirred her coffee slowly, her thoughts wandered. The sound of the cafe door opening and the jingle of the bell drew her attention instinctively. When she looked up, her breath caught in her throat. It was Henry. He looked different, yet exactly the same as she remembered. His hair was a little shorter, a few fine lines etched his face, but the warm smile was unmistakable. He was holding a stack of books, scanning the room for a seat when his eyes met hers. "Sophia?" His voice sounded surprised but filled with tenderness. "Henry." She could barely speak, a whirlwind of emotions coursing through her. It felt like time had stopped. He walked over to her, hesitant but with a glimmer in his eyes. "It's been so long, I almost didn't believe it was you when I saw you." "Yes, it has been a long time," she replied, trying to hide the tremble in her voice. "Please, sit down." He placed his books on the chair next to him and took a seat across from her. For a moment, neither of them knew what to say. The silence was broken by the waiter bringing Sophia's cappuccino. "You look great," Henry finally said, offering a soft smile. Sophia laughed nervously. "Don't let appearances fool you." Henry tilted his head, studying her. "Even so, you're still Sophia, the one who taught me to believe in good things." She turned her gaze toward the window, her eyes welling up with tears. "A lot has changed since then, Henry. I'm not that person anymore." "Then tell me," he said, his voice gentle but resolute. "What happened?" Sophia hesitated, but there was something in his eyes that made her want to trust him. She began to speak, recounting the disastrous engagement, Jack's obsession, and how it had left her drained and uncertain. Henry listened without interrupting, occasionally nodding. By the time she finished, she felt lighter, as if an enormous weight had been lifted from her shoulders. "I had no idea you were going through all of this," he said, his voice full of sincerity. "But I'm here now, and I want to help in any way I can." "Henry, I don't know if I can accept help," she said, her eyes fixed on her cup. "I'm afraid that—" "Of what?" he asked, leaning forward slightly. "Of things getting better. Of you becoming yourself again. Sophia, I know you, and if there's one thing I'm sure of, it's that you're not the kind of person who would let this defeat you." His words struck something deep within her. It was as if a part of Sophia that had long been buried was starting to wake up. She looked up at him, and for the first time in weeks she felt truly seen. In the days that followed, Henry became a constant presence in Sophia's life. He encouraged her to leave the house, to pick up hobbies she had abandoned. One day, he showed up with an old sketchbook she had used when she was younger. "Do you still draw?" he asked, handing her the notebook. No, not since— Well, it's been a long time," she replied, flipping through the old pages. "Then maybe it's time to start again," he said with a smile. With his help, Sophia began to rediscover small moments of joy. They spent hours talking about everything and nothing, strolling through the park or laughing over old memories. Slowly, she felt her confidence returning. "Do you remember that time we got lost in the woods?" Henry asked one evening as they walked by a lake. "How could I forget? You tried to pretend you knew where we were, but you were just as lost as I was," Sophia said, laughing. "Hey, I was trying to impress you," he said, feigning indignation. "Well, it didn't work," she replied, playfully nudging him. "But it was fun." They stopped walking, and Sophia realized how comfortable the silence between them was. Henry looked at her, his eyes more serious now. "I never forgot you, Sophia," he said softly. "Even as life moved on, you were always with me." Sophia felt her heart race. She didn't know what to say, but in that moment she didn't need to. His eyes said it all. Sophia knew there was still a long road ahead, but in that moment she felt hope. And as she looked at Henry, she realized that maybe, just maybe, it was possible to find happiness again. It was a cold, silent night when Sophia arrived home. The living room lights were on, but she knew her father Alexander was at a meeting and wouldn't be back until late. She dropped her keys on the hallway table and sighed, exhausted after a long day. Henry had spent the afternoon with her, helping organize the details for an art exhibit she had finally decided to participate in. But now, alone in the house, the familiar fear began whispering in her mind again. As Sophia stepped into the living room, she froze. Jack was there sitting on the couch, his expression a mix of desperation and cold determination. "Good evening, Sophia," he said, his voice controlled but dripping with dark intent. "How did you get in here?" she asked, her voice trembling slightly. She began to step back, but Jack rose quickly, blocking her path. "Is that how you greet me, after everything we've been through together?" He tilted his head, studying her. "I had to get creative considering how hard you've been trying to avoid me." "Get out of my house, Jack, now," Sophia demanded, trying to keep her voice steady, though her heart was pounding so hard it felt like it might burst from her chest. He laughed, but it was hollow and sinister. "Get out of your house. Sophia, I'm not here to fight. I'm here to bring you back." to show you that we can still be happy together." She shook her head in disbelief. "Happy? You've stalked me, humiliated me, terrified me. How can you think there's anything left to save between us? You're out of your mind." Jack took a step closer to her, his face twisted with the anger he was struggling to contain. "I did everything out of love, Sophia. All I ever wanted was you. How did you expect me to react to the mere idea that you might be betraying me? Of course I lost control, but it was all because I love you. You know that." "That's not love, Jack," she said, her voice now steadier. "It's control, obsession, and I won't be your prisoner. I choose who I want to share my life with, and that person is definitely not you." Before he could respond, the sound of a car pulling up outside caught both their attention. It was Henry. Sophia felt a wave of relief but also a surge of new fear. Jack was not someone who handled confrontations well. "Ah, your new hero has arrived," Jack sneered. Of course he'd show up. Always ready to save you, isn't he? Let's just hope he knows what he's getting himself into. Wouldn't want him to be caught off guard. Henry walked through the front door, which Sophia had left unlocked. When he saw Jack, he stopped immediately, his eyes narrowing. "Jack," Henry said calmly, though his stance was firm. "You need to leave now, or I'll call the police." "This has nothing to do with you," Jack shot back, stepping closer to Henry. "This is between me and Sophia. I don't even know where you fit into this." "No," Sophia said, stepping forward. "This is over, Jack. There is no us anymore. And the more you push, the more you destroy any respect I might have had for you." Jack laughed again, but this time it was a desperate sound. "You think he's better than me, Sophia? You think he can love you the way I did? You think he can make you feel as good in bed as I did?" Sophia was stunned by his insinuations, but she held her ground. "This isn't about who's better, Jack," she replied firmly. "It's about who respects me, who understands that I'm free to choose my life, and you never understood that." Jack was silent for a moment, but then something shifted in his expression. He pulled something from his pocket, a small envelope, and threw it onto the table. "You think you know everything, don't you? Read this, Sophia. It'll change how you see me, how you see everything." She hesitated, but eventually picked up the envelope with trembling hands. As she opened it, she found papers, old documents, letters. As she read, her eyes widened in shock. This can't be true," she murmured, looking up at Jack. "It is," he said triumphantly. "Your precious Henry isn't as perfect as he seems. Ask him about the time he spent away, about what he left behind." Sophia turned to Henry, confused. He appeared calm, but there was a heaviness in his eyes. "I was going to tell you," Henry said, meeting her gaze directly, "but not like this. Yes, I made mistakes in my past, Sophia, mistakes that brought me here. But nothing Jack says changes how I feel about you." "You see, Sophia," Jack interjected, desperate to regain control. "He's no different from me. He has secrets too." Sophia took a deep breath, steadying herself. "We all have secrets, Jack, and I can't judge him for that. The difference is, he gives me a choice, and I choose not to live under your control anymore." Henry stepped forward, positioning himself between her and Jack. "You heard her. It's time for you to leave." Jack looked at them both, his expression shifting between anger and defeat. Finally, he turned and walked out, slamming the door behind him. Sophia collapsed onto the couch, breathing deeply as she tried to process everything. Henry sat down next to her, but kept a respectful distance. "Are you okay?" he asked softly. "Yes," she said after a moment. "For the first time, I think I am." Henry smiled faintly. "I'm here, Sophia, whether it's to face the past or build the future." She looked at him, and despite her exhaustion, she felt something she hadn't felt in a long time: hope. Then Henry looked at her and said, "Sophia, I don't want there to be any secrets between us. If you want to know, I'll tell you everything. No holding back." Sophia felt the sincerity in Henry's words, and with a calm voice she replied, "I know you must have gone through difficult times, but that doesn't give me the right to invade your privacy. Whenever you feel ready, I'll be here to listen, without judgment." He smiled and gave her a gentle hug. The rising sun bathed Sophia's house in light. It was the first morning in weeks that she woke up without the suffocating weight of fear. The battle with Jack had been grueling, but she had won, not with force but with courage, and the decision to no longer let him control her life. Now, as she gazed at the sky through her bedroom window, she felt a peace she hadn't experienced in a long time. In the kitchen, Alexander was making breakfast. He wasn't the best cook, but he made a point of taking care of Sophia now that things seemed calmer. "Good morning, Dad," she said, walking in with a light but genuine smile. "Good morning, sweetheart," he replied, looking up from the frying pan. There are pancakes, but I can't promise they're any good. Sophia laughed, feeling the warmth of the moment. It was simple, but deeply meaningful. It doesn't matter, as long as they're made by you. As they ate, the sound of the doorbell interrupted the calm. Sophia stood up to answer, curious. When she opened the door, there was Henry, holding a small paper bag and wearing a shy smile. "Good morning," he said. "I hope I'm not interrupting anything." "Of course not," she replied, surprised but happy. "Come in." Henry stepped inside, greeting Alexander with a polite nod. He handed Sophia the bag. "I saw this at a shop yesterday and thought it suited you." Sophia opened the package to find a small leather notebook with blank pages. She ran her fingers over the cover, touched. "Henry, it's beautiful. Thank you. It's for you to keep drawing," he said softly. "I know how much it helps you." Sophia felt her eyes fill with tears. "You always know what to say, don't you?" Alexander noticed the peace and happiness his daughter felt around Henry. Without hesitation, he said, "I approve of your relationship," and smiled. Henry and Sophia just laughed, not confirming anything. In the days that followed, Sophia began rebuilding her life. She enrolled in art classes and accepted a job as an assistant at a local gallery. With each passing day, she felt more confident, more in control of her own destiny. Henry remained by her side but gave her space. He understood that Sophia needed time to rediscover herself before she could open her heart to a new love. One afternoon, while they were walking through the park, Henry finally brought up the topic they had both been avoiding. "Sophia," he began, stopping next to a bench. "I know you're still healing, but I want you to know that I'm here no matter what you decide." She sat down on the bench, looking out at the lake in front of them. For a moment, she stayed silent, letting his words sink in. Then she turned to face him. "Henry, you've been my strength when I thought I had none. But I need to be honest. I'm still learning to be myself again. I don't want to rush into anything. But at the same time, I can't let past mistakes ruin my future." He smiled, a genuine smile that lit up his eyes. "I don't expect anything more than that, Sophia. Seeing you happy is enough for me, and if it's not with me, all I can do is wish you the best." Sophia felt her heart warm. "Thank you for being so patient. I'll never forget what you've done for me." Months passed, and Sophia began showcasing her drawings at the gallery where she worked. On the night of her first exhibition, the room was packed with friends and admirers of her art. Henry was there, of course, but not in the spotlight. He watched her from a distance, proud of her accomplishments. At the end of the night, as the guests began to leave, Sophia walked up to him. "You know this exhibition only happened because you encouraged me," she said, holding his hands. "No, Sophia," he replied, giving her fingers a gentle squeeze. "It happened because you made it happen." She smiled, but this time there was something different in her eyes. It was as if a weight had been completely lifted. "Henry, I think I'm ready," she said, her voice steady but full of emotion. "Ready for what?" he asked, surprised. "To give us a chance. To start over without fear." He smiled, but didn't say anything. He simply pulled her into a hug, letting the moment speak for itself. As time went on, Sophia not only rebuilt her life, but also discovered a new meaning for love and respect. Her relationship with Henry flourished, grounded in the caution and maturity they both valued. There was no rush, just the comfort of being in each other's company. One evening, as they strolled through the same park where they had talked months earlier, Sophia stopped and took his hand. "You know what I've learned through all of this, Henry?" "What's that?" "That the freedom to be who we are is the greatest gift we can give ourselves. And I finally feel free." He pulled her closer, looking into her eyes. "And it's a privilege to be by your side as you discover that." Sophia smiled, knowing that, for the first time in a long while, she was exactly where she was meant to be, and with the right person.